Well, today we're going to talk about disability and its corresponding system of oppression, ableism. This is only a brief introduction, so we're not going to cover everything, or like even most things. But all my sources are linked in the description below if you want to learn more. The word disability refers to physical and/or mental conditions that impair an individual's function or participation in the world around them. These conditions, or impairments, can be intrinsically limiting, such as chronic pain, that prevents a person from doing basic functions predicated on physical movement, so like leaving the house or even getting out of bed. Or impairments can be societally constructed. For instance, say you're a person in a wheelchair trying to use a building without a ramp, let's say a library. Your inability to access the information in that library is not intrinsic to your disability. Your inability to access the library and its resources is created by the physical lack of a ramp on the building. Your inability to access this library was created by the architects who designed the building without accounting for the needs of people who can't use stairs. It's worth noting that disabilities are often both intrinsically limiting and societally constructed. To use the example of wheelchair users again, not being able to walk is an intrinsic limitation. If you have a mobility impairment, you likely can't go hiking and experience the views at the top of that trail. But that participation barrier doesn't exist because someone, like the architects of that library, artificially created it. It just exists. As with a lot of types of oppression, if not all types of oppression, actually, the dominant group sets its characteristics and needs up as the norm, and anything that falls outside of that norm as abnormal. By positioning disability as an abnormality, the dominant culture is able to set up society in such a way that centers non-disabled people's needs by default and dismisses or marginalizes the needs of disabled people, thereby putting them at a social disadvantage. To illustrate this, I want to talk about some common accommodations, or things that can be adjusted or modified to better facilitate a disabled person's function or participation in the world around them. So glasses are totally normal, right? They're also an assistive aid for people who can't see on their own. However, the society I live in has deemed the accommodation necessary for this limitation, glasses, as something normal people can need. So my nearsightedness isn't societally disabling. Because needing glasses is not a disability, at least in 2020 in the US, we can see that, at least to some degree, disability is societally constructed. Our society is full of accommodations. For instance, you can't run at 60 miles an hour, so we have cars to accommodate that speed of travel. Disabled people also can't do that. But if we make a car that's designed to be more accessible for wheelchair users, suddenly people are up in arms about handouts and unreasonable accommodations. But that's the same accommodation that non-disabled people have. We need to shift our focus from how disabled people aren't able to participate in our society to how our society limits disabled people from actively participating. So with that in mind, how can non-disabled people, or people who are societally enabled, work for disability justice? Here are 3 easy ways to start. 1. Start noticing the ways that you are societally enabled and try to identify what accommodations someone without your ability would need to participate in the same way that you do. 2. Listen to disabled people. Seek out their stories and learn more about their experiences. Here's a playlist of disabled YouTubers curated by Annie Elaney, who is themselves a disabled YouTuber. 3. Start conversations about disability in your communities. This can be really intimidating, but it's okay if you don't do it perfectly. The key thing here is to start the conversation. When possible, please work to include the disabled people who are already in your communities in your conversations. If there's someone you know in your community who you'd like to start a conversation with, make sure to get their consent before launching into your spiel about how valuable their perspective is and how much you can learn from them. Try saying, "Hey, I'm trying to learn more about disability and how to make our community more inclusive for our disabled community members. Would you be open to talking about this with me sometime?" This states your intent and doesn't put them on the spot to have this conversation right now if they don't want to. And that's it for this video, y'all. I've listed the sources that I drew on for this video in the description below. If you want to learn more about ableism and disabled communities, I highly recommend checking out the documentary Crip Camp on Netflix. It explores a community of disabled teenagers at a summer camp in the 70s and the political activism that grew out of their community. If you watch it, you might at times find yourself feeling uncomfortable. I would invite you to sit with that discomfort, figure out where it's coming from, and how to engage with it in a way that's not just turning it off because it made you uncomfortable. This line of exploration may lead you to identify some areas of internalized ableism that could be useful to dig into and start unpacking. I also really love Mia Mingus's work and Sins Invalid. And finally, not to be a YouTuber, but comment and subscribe if you want to. I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this, especially if you're disabled. Did I get something wrong or misrepresent community consensus? Let me know. This is meant to be a conversation starter, so feel free to use it to start a conversation with me if you want to. And subscribe if you want more of this. I'm working on a series about contextualizing social justice concepts, where I'll provide an introduction to a concept as it's used today, as well as a brief overview of how the concept developed over time. I think if you liked this, you'll likely like that too. So subscribe to be notified of when I eventually upload. Lido, look at you, you're on camera!